Rebecca Schaeffer was young, talented, and on the rise. By the late 1980s, she had already made a name for herself as the star of the sitcom My Sister Sam. Hollywood had its eyes on her. She was only 21 years old, but her career was just beginning. But behind the scenes, a dangerous obsession was growing. A man named Robert John Bardo, from Tucson, Arizona, had become fixated on Rebecca. He was a superfan who sent her letters and believed he had some sort of special connection with her. When Rebecca kindly replied to one of his letters, it only fueled his obsession. Over time, Bardo's fantasies turned darker. He began stalking her from afar, even traveling to Los Angeles once before, but was turned away at the Warner Bros. Studio gate. Undeterred, he returned, this time determined not just to meet her, but to change her life forever. On July 18, 1989, Bardo hired a private investigator for just $250 to find Rebecca's home address, something shockingly easy to obtain back then through DMV records. Armed with this information, he traveled to her Los Angeles apartment building, carrying a gun. That morning, Rebecca answered the door. Bardo introduced himself as a fan, and she politely told him she wasn't interested. She closed the door, likely thinking that was the end of it. But minutes later, Bardo rang the bell again. When Rebecca came back to the door, frustrated, she told him firmly never to return. In that moment, his obsession turned into rage. He pulled out his gun and shot her in the chest. Rebecca Schaeffer died at just 21 years old, her promising future stolen by a man who claimed to be her fan. Bardo was quickly caught and convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he remains today. Rebecca's death sent shockwaves through Hollywood. It led to major changes in stalking laws and privacy protections, including the creation of California's first anti-stalking law in 1990. Her story is a tragic reminder of the dangers of obsessive fandom, and how a rising star's light was extinguished far too soon. It was the evening of December 8, 1980, outside the Dakota Apartments in New York City. Music legend John Lennon, former Beatle, and one of the most influential artists of all time, had just finished a recording session with his wife, Yoko Ono. He was 40 years old, finally stepping back into the spotlight after years of quiet family life. Waiting outside the building that night was a man named Mark David Chapman. To most, he looked like just another fan. Earlier that same day, Chapman had even asked Lennon for an autograph. A photographer captured the surreal moment, Lennon signing a copy of Double Fantasy for the man who would later kill him. Chapman wasn't just a fan, he was obsessed. He idolized Lennon but also resented him. In his mind, Lennon's wealth and lyrics about peace and love were hypocritical. Chapman carried a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, believing he was somehow connected to its main character, Holden Caulfield. At around 10:50 p.m., Lennon and Yoko returned home. As they walked toward the entrance, Chapman pulled out a .38 revolver. He fired 5 shots, 4 of them striking Lennon in the back. John Lennon collapsed, bleeding heavily, while Yoko screamed for help. Lennon was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. He was pronounced dead on arrival. News of his murder spread like wildfire. Fans across the world stood in disbelief, mourning the sudden and violent end of a man who preached peace. Meanwhile, Chapman didn't run. He calmly remained at the scene, reading his copy of The Catcher in the Rye, until police arrived. He later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life. To this day, he remains behind bars, with every parole hearing drawing public outrage. John Lennon's death wasn't just the loss of a musician, it was the silencing of a cultural voice. A man who sang about giving peace a chance, taken by the hands of his own fan. Selena Quintanilla Perez was more than a singer. She was a cultural icon. Known simply as Selena, she was the queen of Tejano music, blending Latin sounds with pop and earning fans across the world. By the mid-1990s, She was only 23 years old, but she had already won a Grammy and was on the brink of becoming an international superstar. But Selena's bright future was stolen, not by a stranger, but by someone she trusted. That person was Yolanda Saldivar. She wasn't just a fan. She was the president of Selena's fan club and later managed her clothing boutiques. At first, Selena considered her a loyal friend, but behind the scenes, Yolanda's behavior grew obsessive and controlling. In early 1995, Selena's family discovered troubling evidence. Yolanda had been embezzling money from both the fan club and the boutiques. Selena confronted her, demanding financial records and answers. On March 31, 1995, Selena agreed to meet Yolanda at a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi, Texas. She thought she was going there to collect documents. Instead, it would be the last day of her life. Inside the motel room, tensions rose. Selena told Yolanda their business relationship was over. As Selena turned to leave, Yolanda pulled out a revolver and shot her in the back. Bleeding heavily, Selena managed to run to the hotel lobby, leaving a 392-foot trail of blood. She collapsed at the front desk, gasping out her killer's name before losing consciousness. Despite emergency efforts at a nearby hospital, Selena was pronounced dead. She was just 23 years old. Yolanda Saldivar locked herself in her truck after the shooting, holding police at bay for nearly 9 hours before surrendering. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole in 2025. Selena's death devastated millions. Her funeral drew tens of thousands of mourners, and her legacy has only grown in the decades since. She broke barriers for Latina artists, and her music still inspires generations. But at the heart of her story lies a chilling truth. Selena wasn't killed by an enemy, but by someone she welcomed into her inner circle. A fan turned friend, whose obsession turned deadly. Christina Grimmie was living her dream. She was a rising star who first captured the world's attention on YouTube, covering popular songs with her powerful voice. Her talent soon took her to national television, where she became a finalist on The Voice. By 2016, she was only 22 years old and already on the path to a major music career. But her life would be cut short in a shocking act of violence by someone who claimed to be her fan. That person was Kevin James Loibel, a 27-year-old man from Florida. To those around him, Loibel was quiet and withdrawn. But privately, he had developed an unhealthy obsession with Christina. He watched her videos constantly, altered his appearance in hopes of impressing her, and convinced himself that they were destined to be together. On June 10, 2016, Christina was performing at the Plaza Live in Orlando, Florida. After her set, she did what she loved most, meeting fans face to face. She signed autographs, posed for photos, and greeted everyone with the same kindness that made her beloved online. Among the crowd was Loibel. He had traveled to the venue armed with 2 handguns, extra magazines, and a hunting knife. As Christina opened her arms to greet him with a hug, he pulled out a gun and shot her multiple times at point-blank range. The scene erupted into chaos. Christina's brother, Marcus, tackled Loibel immediately, likely preventing more bloodshed. In the struggle, Loibel turned the gun on himself, ending his own life. Christina was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries were too severe. She died later that night. Her murder shocked the music world. Fans, friends, and fellow artists mourned the young star whose career had only just begun. In the aftermath, Christina's family created the Christina Grimmie Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of gun violence and families affected by tragedy. Christina's story is heartbreaking, not just because of her talent and potential, but because her kindness was taken advantage of. She welcomed a fan with open arms, only to be betrayed by the very obsession that brought him there. She was just 22 years old, and had her whole life ahead of her. Soccer is more than a sport in Colombia, it's a way of life. And in the early 1990s, No one represented that pride more than Andrés Escobar. Known as the gentleman of the field, Escobar was admired for his calm leadership, clean style of play, and humility. At just 27 years old, he was already a star defender for Atlético Nacional and a hero to the Colombian national team. But his name would forever be tied to one tragic mistake and the violence that followed. It was June 22, 1994, at the FIFA World Cup in the United States. Colombia faced the host nation in a critical match. In the 35th minute, Escobar tried to block a cross from U.S. midfielder John Harkes. Instead, the ball deflected off his foot and rolled into his own net. It was an own goal that helped the U.S. win 2-1, eliminating Colombia from the tournament. For most players, such a mistake would be heartbreaking but forgivable. But back home, Colombia's World Cup campaign carried enormous pressure. Drug cartels had bet millions of dollars on the team's success. The loss fueled anger, disappointment, and, for some, deadly rage. On July 2, 1994, just 10 days after the match, Andrés Escobar went out with friends in Medellin. He was at a nightclub and later stopped at a restaurant parking lot. There he was confronted by several men, including bodyguards linked to powerful cartel associates. Witnesses say they mocked him, shouting "Gol" every time they pulled the trigger. Escobar was shot 6 times. He died in the hospital a short time later. He was only 27 years old. The murder shocked the world. A player who embodied dignity and sportsmanship had been killed over a single mistake in a game. His funeral drew more than 120,000 mourners, and his death became a symbol of the dangerous intersection between sports, money, and violence in Colombia at the time. In 1995, Humberto Muñoz Castro, a bodyguard for cartel-linked brothers, was convicted of Escobar's murder and sentenced to 43 years in prison, later reduced to 26. Andrés Escobar's legacy, however, lives on. His words before the World Cup still echo today. Life doesn't end here, we have to keep going. Though his life was stolen, his memory remains a powerful reminder of both the beauty of the game and the darkness that can surround it.